Shalom to everybody. It's good afternoon. Short Torah for Parshat Teitzei. There is one of the great themes that Rav Kook Zatzal, it was his Yortzeit on Gimel Elul. One of the great things that he spoke about of his thousands of Chidushim was a tension between how we look at a person and how we look at his actions. What Rav Kook is specifically speaking about is how to deal with people who do actions which aren't proper. And how do we, the whole point is that the Torah wants us to somehow to criticize the action, but not criticizing the person. And of course, that it should be very like almost clinical, that we, as I say, we reject the bad that the person did, but on the other hand, that we relate to the person himself as someone who we still fond of, that we still are connected to. And of course, this is a very, very big problem, because we find on the one hand that there's one group of people when someone does something wrong, so they identify the person's wrong that he did with their personality, and just like they reject the action, they reject the personality. On the other hand, there are people who are, like, to a large degree, like very arrogant, and they think, and conceited. They think that they are so objective that they're able to separate completely and to be objective, in that they criticize and judge their actions which are wrong. But and they do that, and on the other hand, they like the person who did those bad actions. Actually, many times this is all false, because the people who are tolerant to the people who do the actions which are bad is because also they don't think that the actions that they're doing are so bad. In other words, they come to identify the action and the person, but in the opposite direction. They tolerate the person not because they think that the action is so bad and it has to be separated from the person who's basically good, but because they don't think that the action deep down is really so bad. So the two like merge together. And of course, the ideal is now is to fight vehemently and to judge and to criticize the action that was done. On the other hand, to remember that when it comes to the Jewish people, there's still a mitzvah after the Chakamocha on various levels, depending on the person's tshuva. And what Rav Kook said on the macro level, also the Talmidim of Rav Kook and America's Arab, they also spoke about the macro level, which I'm speaking now straight without any beating about the bush, but from those, or the people who believe in, who've got an outlook and hashkafa on religious Zionism, without getting into all the semantics. Many times this has become, in the last 20, 30 years, become a very, very challenging tension. Again, I'm speaking about people who are religious Zionists, people who are, it's not one and the other, it's like one whole, Torah and Eretz Israel and Medinat Israel, it's all like one mikshah. And in the last, as I say, 20, 30 years, there's been tremendous tensions in this way. So, for example, let's say when there was the first, when there was the expulsion from Yamit, when there was expulsion from Gush Katif. So all these cases, when there was the signing of the Oslo Accords, which was a terrible Chilul Hashem, and the leading Zionist rabbis were in conflict how to relate to what was going on. I'm speaking about Rav Goren Zatzal, Rav Shaul Yisraeli, on the other hand, Zatzal, Rav Avineh, Rav Melamed, all the Rav Nachum Rabinovich. There's so many great leaders of our Hashkafa, and they had a machloket on how to look at these things. Now I'm getting to the point. The point is, like as Rav Shapira said, is that we have to differentiate between the government and between the state. Governments come and go, and the state is there basically, Bezat Hashem, like for eternity. And that makes for tremendous tension. A person has to be very strong. He has to be very focused on his hashkafa. He has to be able, on the one hand, to criticize, but really fiercely, what the government does, and on the other hand, not to lose control and to see in Medinat Yisrael one of the greatest miracles of Jewish history. Now, many times people can't do that, either because when they tolerate the government and they don't think doesn't do anything to their hashkafa on Medinat Yisrael, is because they don't think it's so bad. They don't think Gush Katif is so bad. They think it's piece of the guy. They don't think Oslo is so bad. So therefore, it doesn't arouse in them any conflict. It doesn't arouse into them even a question, because they're not like intellectually straight. On the other hand, you've got people who are really because these things are so wound up one with another, so they find it difficult to separate, and how to separate. Or take another example. I'm going to tie it up in a moment to Parshat Ki Teitzei. Let's say when about Yom Ha'atzmaut, a simple thing like Yom Ha'atzmaut. So one group says, but hold on, how did Zionism came about? It came about, there was always Zionism, and people always were connected to Israel. But the mass movement which gave an impetus to the founding of Medinat Yisrael, that was done with people who, to a large degree, they left the Torah, and they made no bones about it, that they want to reject the Torah. So that's what one group said. So how can we now relate to a state which the founders and the people running them are people who are against Torah? We won't say anti-Torah, they are against Torah. Other people are saying, no, we, like the people of Merkaz Arav, they're saying we are differentiating. The state is one thing, and the government is another thing. We're saying that just like, for example, Rav Shapira, always on Hanukkah used to say, who were the kings at the time of the second Beit HaMikdash? They were kings which were wicked. They were Herod, etc., etc. They were kings which were not righteous kings. But on the same time, the Rambam says that period of the second temple, in which there was Jewish sovereignty for at least 200 years, that was part of the miracle of Hanukkah. So in one's mind and in one's heart, there is this separation which has to take place. Now, so I just want to try to understand, so how do we do it? These are all very nice words, but how is there any way in which we can do it? In chapter 32 of the Tanya and other places, they're going extensively into it, and it's not a simple matter. So the Ramban in this week's Parsha, what he says is that he speaks about the mitzvah of Hashavat Avedah. When the Torah speaks about Hashavat Avedah and the next mitzvah, or in other words, returning lost property, and the next mitzvah, which is to always help a person who his donkey or his ox or they're cringing under a load, under a burden, so you have to help them. So in concerning these two mitzvot, which always appear together, both here in Parshat Ki Teitzei and in the Mishpatim in Shmot, the Torah uses at least 6-7 times the word achicha, your brother. And in Parshat Mishpatim, it speaks about your enemy. So there's various explanations why is there difference in Parshat Mishpatim. It speaks about if you see your enemy's ox there that was it's falling, you must still help him, like conquer your yetzer. And here it speaks about the whole time your brother. Even though it could be that this so-called brother of yours, this fellow Jew of yours, is not exactly the mouth, as we say in Hebrew, ulokol kach simpati. He is not such a person who arouses much fondness. He's a person who he's done things which I know is not good, and that's why I detest him. I don't like him. So what am I going to do? The Torah says, I see there's a mitzvah to help him, but there's a guy who I hate. And if I hate because I've got reasons to hate. So how am I going to ignore those things which I know are hateful about them? So listen to the words of the Ramban. The Ramban over here it's on Parshat Ki Teitzei, chapter 22, So verse number 4, the Rambam says, V'amar bekan achicha v'sham oivecha. Aviyad speaks about that you have to return the lost object and help the animal, the person's animal, even, Aviyad says in Dvarim, that is your brother. And over there in the book of Shmot, in Parshat Mishpatim, it refers to the mitzvah being applicable even when it's your oivecha, even when he's your enemy. The sonacha, even if it's a person who you hate. Lomar. So how can we do it together? So Ramban says, Taseh imokein. You know what the Torah is saying? Yeah, you can't ignore the fact that he is your enemy. You can't ignore the fact that he broke the Torah and therefore he's a person who in some way we should hate. So why does the Torah call him your brother? The Ramban, in these immortal words, he says, Shmor ha'achva v'tishkach hasina. You know how we do it? One of the ways to do it is to be focused. Uphold, Shmor ha'achva. Remember that we're speaking about fellow Jew, but he did something not right. So he says, v'tishkach hasina, and forget the sin'ah, right? What does it mean to forget the sin'ah? What does it mean in simple language to forget? We just finished saying that you can't ignore. So what he's saying is, when he says to forget, what he means, a synonym for it is, don't attribute it to it too much weight. That's what it means to forget. You can't forget. It's there in your mind. It's just like I put something in my telephone and I put it over there in my archives. I put it over there in a memory chip. So the same thing over here. Remember that the person we're speaking about, a fellow Jew. And now this bad thing that he did, yes, you can't ignore it, right? Unless you don't care about it. But we're speaking about, as I say, people who are genuinely want to have Avodat Hashem. I mean, we're not speaking about people and for those people who, yes, they broke the Torah. And so what am I going to do about it? Forget about it. What does it mean, forget? Forget, we're saying is, what it means is don't give it too much weight. Don't give it too much importance. Put it in, when we put things in our memory, we're saying, yeah, it's important. I'm not going to now press a button which says delete. But you know what? It's not at the center of my focus. And in that way, Be'ezrat Hashem, we're able to hold on to in times which sometimes are very difficult politically. On the one hand, we're able to say, I love the Medina. The Medina is Hashem's way of giving chesed to the Jewish people. This is what it's all about. But look at what the Medina looks like. Okay, so now what we do is we make a break and we say the Memshalah is not the Medina. And what we do is we remember the focus is on Hashem, what the greatness of the Medina is. And all the rest of the thing, we shocheach. We think about it, we fight it, we criticize, sometimes very fiercely, but what we do is we keep focus, as the Ramban says, to keep up the achva and to forget the sin. So Shabbat Shalom lekulam, Be'ezrat Hashem, everyone should continue to have elevated and a good Elul in the lead up now to Rosh Hashanah.